You wake up every morning checking your bank account, don't you? That little ritual you've perfected over the years. The quick glance at your phone before your feet even touch the floor. Sometimes there's relief. Sometimes there's that familiar knot in your stomach. But here's what you won't admit to anyone, not even yourself. You're tired of being a financial slave pretending to be free. You've built a life that looks successful from the outside. You have a job, maybe even a good one. You pay your bills, you have your little comforts. But deep down, you know you're just one crisis away from everything falling apart. You're living paycheck to paycheck in a suit and tie, or behind a mortgage that owns you more than you own it. I am Solomon, and 3,000 years ago, I discovered something that most people today have forgotten. True wealth isn't about the numbers in your account. It's about becoming the kind of person who creates value wherever they go. It's about transforming from someone who receives orders to someone who operates by eternal principles. What I'm about to share with you isn't another get-rich-quick scheme. This isn't about cryptocurrency tips or investment hacks. This is about a fundamental transformation of who you are. From someone who fears money to someone who commands it. From someone who works for security to someone who creates abundance. The wisdom I gained didn't just make me the richest man of my time. It created a legacy that has lasted millennia. And today, you're going to discover how to apply these same principles to break free from the financial mediocrity that has held you captive for far too long. This isn't motivational fluff. This is a battle plan. And if you're ready to stop making excuses and start making real changes, then you need to subscribe to this channel right now. Because what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about money, success, and your true purpose in this world. Your transformation begins today. Number 1. Biblical foundations of financial wisdom. You spend hours reading about financial strategies, don't you? You consume videos, books, courses, all promising the secret formula for wealth. Yet here you are, still struggling with the same patterns, the same limitations, the same fear that whispers in your ear every time you think about taking a real financial risk. You've been looking for wisdom in all the wrong places, seeking gold in rivers that have already been emptied by 1,000 others before you. Let me tell you something that will shatter every financial myth you've ever believed. When I wrote in Proverbs that wisdom is the principal thing, I wasn't speaking in metaphors. I wasn't crafting pretty poetry for religious services. I was revealing the fundamental law that governs all prosperity, all lasting wealth, all true financial freedom. Wisdom isn't just an abstract concept floating in the clouds of spirituality. Wisdom is the most practical, concrete, and strategic asset you can possibly possess. Think of wisdom as the master key that opens every door money cannot touch. Money can buy you a house, but wisdom builds you a home. Money can purchase temporary pleasure, but wisdom creates lasting joy. Money can give you power over circumstances, but wisdom gives you power over yourself. When you seek wisdom first, you're not just changing your bank account. You're changing your entire financial DNA. I accumulated wealth that made kingdoms tremble, not because I chased gold, but because I chased understanding. Every morning before I considered any business decision, any investment, any expenditure, I sought wisdom. I asked myself not just what would bring immediate profit, but what would create lasting value. Not just what would fill my treasury today, but what would build a legacy for generations. This is the difference between those who get rich quick and lose everything, and those who build empires that outlast their own lifetimes. Here's the truth most people refuse to accept. You've been trained to think like a servant when you were born to think like a king. A servant works for wages. A king creates value. A servant follows orders. A king establishes principles. A servant fears scarcity. A king multiplies abundance. Every financial decision you make is either reinforcing your servant mentality or awakening your royal identity. When I say that with wisdom comes riches and honor, I'm revealing a universal principle that transcends time, culture, and economic systems. Wisdom teaches you to see opportunities where others see obstacles. Wisdom shows you how to turn problems into profits. Wisdom reveals the patterns that govern prosperity, the laws that create lasting wealth, the principles that build financial freedom that cannot be shaken by market crashes or economic uncertainty. But here's where most people go wrong. They think wisdom is something you acquire once, like a college degree, and then you're set for life. No. Wisdom is something you must pursue daily, moment by moment, decision by decision. Every choice you make is either making you wiser or making you weaker. Every financial move is either building your understanding or reinforcing your ignorance. The kingly mindset I'm talking about isn't about arrogance or entitlement. It's about taking responsibility for creating value in everything you touch. When you approach your work, your relationships, your investments with the mindset of a king, you stop asking what you can get and start asking what you can give. You stop looking for quick fixes and start building lasting solutions. You stop operating from scarcity and start operating from abundance. Let me paint you a picture that will change how you see every financial opportunity for the rest of your life. Imagine wisdom as a divine investment advisor sitting at your shoulder, whispering the secrets of creation itself. This advisor knows which companies will thrive before they're even founded. This advisor sees which relationships will open doors before you even meet those people. This advisor understands which skills will be valuable before the market even realizes it needs them. This isn't fantasy. This is the reality available to anyone willing to prioritize wisdom over wealth, understanding over immediate gratification, principles over profits. When you align yourself with divine wisdom, you're tapping into the same source that designed the laws of economics, that established the principles of prosperity, that created the very foundations upon which all lasting wealth is built. But wisdom demands something from you that most people aren't willing to give. It demands patience in a world addicted to instant results. It demands integrity in a world that celebrates shortcuts. It demands humility in a world obsessed with ego. It demands long-term thinking in a world focused on quarterly profits. This is why wisdom is rare. This is why true wealth is rare. This is why financial freedom eludes the majority. The practical application starts now, today, with this very moment. Before you make any financial decision, any career move, any investment choice, ask yourself 3 questions that will align you with divine wisdom. First, does this decision create genuine value, or does it merely extract value from others? Second, does this path build character and integrity, or does it compromise my principles for short-term gain? Third, does this choice serve a purpose greater than my immediate desires, or is it just feeding my ego and appetites? These questions will filter out 90% of the financial disasters waiting to destroy your future. They will guide you toward opportunities that don't just make money, but make meaning. They will connect you with ventures that don't just pay your bills, but build your legacy. When you consistently choose wisdom over wealth, something miraculous happens. Wealth begins to chase you instead of you chasing it. Opportunities start presenting themselves without you desperately seeking them. People begin to trust you with bigger responsibilities, bigger resources, bigger impacts. You discover that the fastest way to become rich is to stop trying to get rich and start trying to become wise. This is your moment of decision. You can continue the insanity of seeking financial success through the same thinking that created your current limitations. Or you can embrace the wisdom that has created every lasting fortune, every enduring legacy, every meaningful transformation in human history. The choice is yours, but the consequences are eternal. Number 2, critique of the traditional work model and mindset. You've been sold the greatest lie in human history, and you've been paying for it with your life every single day. You wake up, you go to work, you come home exhausted, and you tell yourself this is security. You convince yourself that as long as you have a steady paycheck, you're safe. You've built your entire identity around being a good employee, a reliable worker, a faithful servant to a system that will discard you the moment it's convenient. But late at night, when the world is quiet and your defenses are down, you feel it, don't you? That hollow ache in your chest that whispers you were meant for something greater. That growing realization that you've traded your dreams for the illusion of safety. That terrifying recognition that you've become a stranger to your own potential, a prisoner in a cage you built with your own hands. The traditional work model isn't just flawed. It's designed to keep you dependent, predictable, and powerless. It's a system that rewards conformity over creativity, obedience over innovation, mediocrity over excellence. You've been conditioned to believe that trading your time for money is noble, that sacrificing your vision for a steady wage is responsible, that abandoning your purpose for job security is mature. This is the mindset of a slave, not the mentality of someone created in the image of the divine. Let me show you the difference between how servants think and how kings think, because this distinction will determine whether you spend the rest of your life building someone else's dream or manifesting your own destiny. A servant wakes up asking, "What do I have to do today?" A king wakes up asking, "What can I create today?" A servant measures success by how well they follow instructions. A king measures success by how effectively they solve problems and create value. A servant seeks job security. A king builds financial freedom. A servant worries about getting fired. A king focuses on becoming irreplaceable. A servant complains about their circumstances. A king changes their circumstances. A servant waits for permission. A king takes responsibility. A servant thinks inside the box. A king realizes there is no box. I want you to imagine two men starting their careers on the same day, in the same company, with the same education and the same opportunities. The first man approaches his work with a servant's mentality. He does exactly what's asked of him, nothing more, nothing less. He watches the clock, counts the hours until Friday, dreams about retirement. He follows procedures without questioning them, accepts limitations without challenging them, settles for incremental raises without demanding transformational growth. The second man approaches the same work with a king's mentality. He sees every task as an opportunity to create value. He looks for problems others haven't noticed and develops solutions others haven't considered. He studies not just his job, but the entire industry. He builds relationships not just with his colleagues, but with everyone who can expand his understanding and influence. He treats his current position not as a destination, but as a laboratory for developing the skills and connections that will launch his own empire. 20 years later, the first man is still in the same company, maybe with a slightly better title, definitely with more responsibilities, but essentially trapped in the same cage, just with better decorations. He's one restructuring away from financial disaster, one health crisis away from bankruptcy, one economic downturn away from losing everything he spent decades building. The second man has either risen to leadership within the company and transformed it, or he's left to build something even greater. He's developed skills that transcend any single job, relationships that create opportunities across multiple industries, and a mindset that turns every challenge into a stepping stone toward greater success. He's not just survived change, he's been the architect of change. This is the difference between filling a jar with holes and building a reservoir that collects and multiplies everything that flows into it. Most people spend their entire careers pouring their energy, their time, their talents into a jar riddled with holes. They work harder and harder, but the level never rises because the system is designed to leak. They mistake motion for progress, activity for achievement, busy work for meaningful work. The holes in this jar are everywhere. Inflation eats away your purchasing power. Taxes consume a massive portion of your income. Living expenses rise faster than your salary. Company restructuring eliminates your position. Economic downturns destroy your industry. Retirement plans fail to provide the security they promised. You spend 40 years filling this jar, only to discover at the end that you're still empty. But when you develop the mindset of a king, you stop trying to fill someone else's broken jar and start building your own reservoir. You develop multiple streams of income that feed into your reservoir. You create value that compounds over time. You build systems that work for you instead of you working for the system. You establish relationships that open doors instead of closing them. You develop skills that appreciate instead of depreciate. The most dangerous phrase in the English language is job security. It's an oxymoron, a contradiction in terms, a lie that has destroyed more dreams and wasted more potential than any other concept in human history. There is no security in depending on someone else's decision about your financial future. There is no safety in building your life around a paycheck that can disappear with 2 weeks' notice. There is no wisdom in trading your creative potential for the illusion of stability. Real security comes from developing abilities that create value in any economy. True safety comes from building relationships that open opportunities in any industry. Genuine stability comes from cultivating a mindset that turns every setback into a setup for a comeback. This is the difference between being employed and being employable, between having a job and having a calling, between earning a living and creating a legacy. But here's the shift that will change everything. Stop asking yourself what job you can get and start asking what value you can create. Stop thinking about what companies will hire you and start thinking about what problems you can solve. Stop wondering if you're qualified for the position and start asking if the position is worthy of your potential. This isn't about quitting your job tomorrow and jumping into entrepreneurship unprepared. This is about changing your mindset while you're still in your current situation. Start thinking like an owner while you're working as an employee. Begin creating value beyond your job description. Develop skills that make you indispensable. Build relationships that transcend your current role. Look for problems you can solve and needs you can meet. When you make this mental shift, your current job becomes a launching pad instead of a prison. Your workplace becomes a training ground instead of a trap. Your colleagues become your network instead of just your coworkers. Your salary becomes your seed money instead of just your survival fund. The world needs what you have to offer, but only if you're willing to stop thinking like a servant and start operating like the king you were created to be. Number 3, biblical examples of applied wisdom. You think you need perfect circumstances to succeed, don't you? You tell yourself that once you get the right opportunity, the ideal environment, the perfect timing, then you'll finally step into your potential. You've been waiting for someone to recognize your talent, validate your dreams, hand you the keys to the life you know you deserve. But what if I told you that the greatest successes in history happen not in spite of impossible circumstances, but because of them? Let me take you back to ancient Babylon, to a young man whose entire world had been destroyed. Daniel was ripped from everything familiar, dragged into a culture that despised his faith, forced to serve a king who had conquered his people. He could have become bitter. He could have compromised. He could have given up on the principles that defined him. Instead, he chose to become indispensable to the very system that had enslaved him. Daniel understood something that most people never grasp. Excellence is not about your circumstances. Excellence is about your response to your circumstances. While his fellow captives complained about their situation, Daniel quietly began to outperform everyone around him. While others compromised their values for temporary comfort, Daniel maintained his integrity even when it threatened his life. While most people would have seen Babylon as the end of their story, Daniel saw it as the beginning of his greatest chapter. Here's what made Daniel different. He didn't wait for the system to change. He changed himself within the system until the system had to acknowledge his value. He didn't demand respect. He earned it through consistent excellence. He didn't fight against the culture. He transcended it by being so valuable that his differences became assets instead of liabilities. Think about this for a moment. Daniel was promoted to positions of power in a government that had destroyed his homeland. Kings who worshipped different gods trusted him with their most critical decisions. Rulers who could have eliminated him instead chose to elevate him. This wasn't luck. This wasn't favoritism. This was the inevitable result of someone who chose excellence over excuses, wisdom over complaints, service over selfishness. But Daniel's success wasn't just professional. It was deeply spiritual. He maintained his prayer life in a culture that forbade it. He kept his dietary principles in a palace that indulged every appetite. He preserved his moral standards in an environment that celebrated corruption. He understood that private victory always precedes public success. That character developed in secret always manifests in significance. Now let me tell you about another man who understood that your starting point doesn't determine your ending point. Joseph began as the favored son in a family that should have launched him into a life of privilege and ease. Instead, his own brothers betrayed him, sold him into slavery, and left him for dead. If anyone had an excuse to give up, to become bitter, to abandon his dreams, it was Joseph. But Joseph possessed something more powerful than favorable circumstances. He possessed an unshakable understanding of his purpose. Even as a slave in Potiphar's house, he worked with the excellence of an owner. Even in prison for a crime he didn't commit, he served with the heart of a king. Even when forgotten by those he had helped, he continued to prepare for the promotion he knew was coming. Joseph's wisdom wasn't theoretical. It was intensely practical. He observed patterns others missed. He prepared for futures others couldn't see. He managed resources others would have wasted. When Pharaoh needed someone to save Egypt from famine, he didn't look for someone with the right credentials or the best connections. He looked for someone with proven wisdom, tested character, and practical ability. Joseph had been developing all three in the crucible of adversity. Think about the magnitude of what Joseph accomplished. Without technology, without formal education, without financial backing, without political connections, he designed and implemented an economic strategy that saved not just Egypt, but the entire known world from starvation. He took a nation from the brink of disaster to the pinnacle of prosperity. He transformed from forgotten prisoner to indispensable leader in a single conversation. This is what happens when you stop making excuses and start making excellence your standard. This is what occurs when you quit waiting for perfect circumstances and start creating perfect responses. This is the result when you choose to see every setback as a setup, every prison as preparation, every betrayal as redirection towards something greater. Both Daniel and Joseph understood a principle that eludes most people. Your reputation is not built by what you say about yourself. Your reputation is built by what your work says about you. They didn't spend time networking or politicking or trying to impress the right people. They simply made themselves so valuable, so reliable, so excellent that influence came looking for them. Here's the turning point that separates those who thrive from those who merely survive. Daniel and Joseph both faced the same temptation you face every day. The temptation to compromise their standards for immediate relief. The temptation to blame their circumstances for their limitations. The temptation to lower their expectations to match their current reality. But they understood something profound. Your circumstances are temporary, but your character is permanent. Daniel could have eaten the king's food and abandoned his principles. It would have been easier. It would have been more comfortable. It would have eliminated conflict. But he knew that every compromise makes the next compromise easier. Every surrender of principle weakens your foundation for future challenges. Every time you trade your values for convenience, You're selling pieces of your soul that you'll never be able to buy back. Joseph could have become bitter about his brother's betrayal. He could have given up when Potiphar's wife falsely accused him. He could have accepted prison as his permanent reality. But he understood that bitterness is a poison you drink hoping someone else will die. He knew that your response to injustice reveals more about your character than the injustice itself reveals about others. The practical wisdom both men applied can transform your situation starting today. First, they excelled in small things before they were trusted with big things. They didn't wait for significant responsibilities to demonstrate their capabilities. They showed their character in insignificant moments, knowing that how you handle small challenges determines whether you'll be trusted with large opportunities. Second, they maintained their integrity even when no one was watching. They understood that character is who you are when no one can see you, when there are no consequences for cutting corners, when you could compromise without anyone knowing. This private integrity created the internal strength necessary for public success. Third, they studied their environment without being contaminated by it. Daniel learned Babylonian wisdom without adopting Babylonian values. Joseph mastered Egyptian systems without embracing Egyptian principles. They became fluent in foreign cultures while remaining faithful to their own convictions. Fourth, they served others' success before pursuing their own advancement. Daniel made kings more successful. Joseph made Potiphar's household more prosperous and Egypt more secure. They understood that the fastest way to reach the top is to help others get there first. Your situation might feel impossible, but impossible is just another word for unprecedented opportunity. Your challenges might seem overwhelming, but overwhelming circumstances create space for overwhelming victories. Your environment might be hostile, but hostile environments are where diamonds are formed, where gold is refined, where champions are made. The question isn't whether you can succeed despite your circumstances. The question is whether you have the character to succeed because of them. Number 4, financial education with wisdom and purpose. You've been lied to about money for your entire life, and those lies are keeping you trapped in cycles of financial mediocrity that you mistake for normalcy. You've been taught that money is the root of all evil, when the truth is that the love of money, the worship of money, the pursuit of money as an end in itself, is what destroys souls and devastates lives. Money itself is neither good nor evil. Money is simply a tool, and like any tool, its value depends entirely on the wisdom, character, and purpose of the person wielding it. Let me reveal something that will fundamentally shift how you see every dollar that passes through your hands. Money is stored energy. It represents time you've invested, value you've created, problems you've solved, needs you've met. When you spend money carelessly, you're not just wasting currency. You're wasting the life energy that created it. When you manage money wisely, you're not just accumulating wealth. You're multiplying the impact of every hour you've worked, every sacrifice you've made, every dream you've pursued. The educational system has systematically failed to prepare you for financial reality. You spent years learning about historical events that have no bearing on your daily life, mathematical theories you'll never apply, scientific principles you'll never use. But no one taught you how to budget, how to invest, how to build wealth, how to create multiple income streams, how to protect yourself from economic uncertainty. This wasn't an oversight. This was intentional. A financially educated population is harder to control, harder to manipulate, harder to keep dependent on systems designed to extract value rather than create it. But the wisdom of Scripture anticipated this vacuum and filled it with principles that have created more lasting wealth than all the modern financial theories combined. When I wrote that the borrower is slave to the lender, I wasn't just making a poetic observation. I was revealing a fundamental law of financial physics. Every debt you carry is a chain that limits your freedom, a weight that slows your progress, a voice that whispers limitations into your dreams. Here's the truth that credit card companies, banks, and financial institutions don't want you to understand. Debt is designed to be permanent. The minimum payments are calculated to keep you paying interest for decades while barely touching the principal. The promotional rates are bait to hook you into agreements that will cost you exponentially more than you ever intended to pay. The convenience is engineered to make you forget that every swipe is a small surrender of your financial future. Consider the difference between two people who understand money and two people who are merely used by it. The first person sees a sale and thinks about how much they can save. They buy things they don't need with money they don't have to impress people they don't like. They finance their lifestyle instead of investing in their future. They mistake motion for progress, spending for success, accumulation for achievement. The second person sees the same sale and asks whether this purchase serves their long-term goals. They buy assets that appreciate instead of liabilities that depreciate. They invest in their capacity to earn before they increase their propensity to spend. They understand that every dollar spent is a dollar that can't be invested. Every debt assumed is a future opportunity sacrificed. Every impulse indulged is a principle abandoned. Let me tell you about a principle that Joseph applied to save an entire civilization. A principle so powerful it can transform your financial reality if you have the discipline to implement it. Joseph understood that abundance and scarcity follow predictable cycles. During the 7 years of plenty, he didn't allow Egypt to become intoxicated by temporary prosperity. Instead, he systematically stored 20% of everything produced, creating a reserve that would sustain the nation through 7 years of famine. This isn't just ancient history. This is a financial strategy that will revolutionize your future if you apply it consistently. During every season of increase in your income, instead of increasing your lifestyle proportionally, store a percentage for seasons of challenge. Build reserves that give you options when others are desperate. Create buffers that allow you to take calculated risks when opportunities present themselves. But storage alone isn't enough. Joseph didn't just hoard grain. He managed it strategically, distributing it wisely, using it to create lasting relationships and sustainable systems. Your financial reserves aren't meant to sit idle. They're meant to be deployed strategically to create more value, solve bigger problems, seize greater opportunities. The ant, which I praised for its wisdom, doesn't just work hard. It works with foresight. During summer, when food is abundant, the ant prepares for winter when resources will be scarce. The ant doesn't assume current conditions will continue indefinitely. It plans for change, prepares for challenge, positions itself for survival and success regardless of external circumstances. Most people live like grasshoppers, consuming everything available in the moment, assuming that current conditions will continue forever. When winter comes, they're unprepared, dependent on others, vulnerable to every economic shift. They've mistaken temporary prosperity for permanent security, present comfort for future stability. Here's a financial truth that will separate you from the majority of people who retire broke despite decades of work. Your income is not your wealth. Your expenses are not your lifestyle. Your job is not your security. Your salary is simply the raw material from which you can build actual wealth if you have the wisdom to transform income into assets, expenses into investments, jobs into stepping stones toward financial independence. The practical application begins with a fundamental shift in how you categorize every financial decision. Before you spend any money, ask yourself whether this purchase is an asset or a liability. An asset puts money in your pocket over time. A liability takes money out of your pocket over time. Most people think their house is an asset when it's actually the largest liability they'll ever assume. Most people buy cars as if they're investments when they're actually depreciating liabilities that drain wealth through payments, insurance, maintenance, and depreciation. Real assets generate income, appreciate in value, or reduce your expenses. Real estate that you rent to others is an asset. Stocks that pay dividends are assets. Skills that increase your earning capacity are assets. Relationships that create opportunities are assets. Knowledge that solves problems is an asset. Everything else is either a liability or at best a necessary expense. But even more important than distinguishing between assets and liabilities is understanding the relationship between money and purpose. Money without purpose becomes either an obsession that destroys your soul or a tool that rusts from lack of use. Money with purpose becomes a force that transforms your world and extends your influence far beyond what you could achieve with your hands alone. When you align your financial goals with your life purpose, several things happen simultaneously. First, you develop the motivation necessary to make difficult financial decisions, to delay gratification, to sacrifice temporary pleasures for long-term gains. Second, you attract resources and opportunities that align with your mission, because people invest in vision, not just ventures. Third, you create meaning that transcends the accumulation of wealth, building something that will outlast your lifetime. Abraham understood this. Job understood this. David understood this. They weren't just rich. They were stewards of resources that served purposes greater than their personal comfort. Their wealth created legacy, blessing, impact that extended far beyond their individual lives. They used money as a tool to build something eternal in a world obsessed with temporal accumulation. Your relationship with money reveals your relationship with power, with responsibility, with purpose, with eternity. When you master money, you're not just creating financial freedom. You're developing the character necessary to handle greater responsibilities, the wisdom necessary to create lasting impact, the integrity necessary to be trusted with influence that extends far beyond your personal circle. This is your invitation to stop being used by money and start using money to build the life, the legacy, the impact you were created to manifest. Number 5, mindset of excellence, leadership, and resilience. You've been living beneath your potential for so long that you've forgotten what excellence feels like, haven't you? You've settled into patterns of mediocrity so comfortable that you mistake them for contentment. You do just enough to avoid criticism, just enough to meet expectations, just enough to keep your position secure. But deep inside, where your true self still whispers despite years of neglect, you know you were created for something far greater than this diminished version of yourself you've accepted as normal. Excellence isn't about perfection. Excellence is about giving everything you have to whatever is in front of you, regardless of how small or seemingly insignificant that task might appear. Excellence is about understanding that how you do anything is how you do everything. Excellence is about recognizing that every moment is either building your reputation or destroying it. Every action is either preparing you for promotion or disqualifying you from opportunity. Let me show you the difference between good enough and excellent, because this distinction will determine whether you spend your life serving or leading, following or creating, reacting or responding. Good enough asks, what's the minimum I can do and still be acceptable? Excellence asks, what's the maximum value I can create in this situation? Good enough focuses on avoiding failure. Excellence focuses on creating success. Good enough seeks to meet standards. Excellence seeks to set them. When Daniel was taken captive to Babylon, he could have done just enough to survive. He could have blended in, kept his head down, avoided attracting attention. Instead, he chose to excel in everything, even in a culture that despised his values. He mastered their language better than natives. He understood their customs more deeply than citizens. He served their interests more faithfully than their own people. This wasn't compromise. This was strategic excellence that positioned him for influence. Excellence in small things is preparation for excellence in large things. The way you handle minor responsibilities reveals whether you can be trusted with major opportunities. The attention you give to details others overlook demonstrates whether you have the character necessary for leadership. The consistency you maintain when no one is watching proves whether you have the integrity required for influence. But here's what most people miss about excellence. Excellence isn't just about doing more or working harder. Excellence is about doing the right things with the right heart for the right reasons. It's about understanding that everything you do is either serving a purpose greater than yourself or merely feeding your own ego and appetites. It's about recognizing that true excellence always seeks to elevate others, solve problems, create value, build something lasting. I want you to imagine two people working in the same office, doing similar jobs, with comparable skills and education. The first person approaches work as a transaction. They trade their time for money, their energy for a paycheck, their presence for security. They do what's required when it's required, how it's required. They complete tasks, fulfill obligations, meet deadlines. At the end of each day, they've done their job. The second person approaches work as a calling. They see every task as an opportunity to create value, every challenge as a chance to develop solutions, every interaction as a possibility to build relationships. They don't just complete assignments, they improve processes. They don't just fulfill requirements, they anticipate needs. They don't just meet expectations, they exceed them consistently, quietly, without fanfare or demand for recognition. Over time, something remarkable happens. The first person remains exactly where they started, perhaps with incremental raises that barely keep pace with inflation, maybe with slight improvements in title that don't significantly change their responsibilities or impact. The second person becomes indispensable. Opportunities seek them out. Promotions come naturally. Resources flow toward them because everyone recognizes their value. This is the power of silent excellence. Not the excellence that seeks applause, but the excellence that serves others. Not the excellence that demands recognition, but the excellence that earns respect. Not the excellence that promotes itself, but the excellence that promotes everyone it touches. But excellence alone is not enough. Excellence without resilience is like a beautiful building without a foundation. It looks impressive until the storms come, and then it crumbles at the first sign of serious pressure. Resilience is what allows you to maintain excellence even when circumstances turn against you, even when others disappoint you, even when your efforts seem unappreciated or unrewarded. Joseph demonstrated this kind of resilience throughout his journey from favored son to forgotten prisoner to indispensable leader. Every betrayal could have broken his spirit. Every injustice could have poisoned his heart. Every setback could have convinced him to abandon his principles. Instead, each challenge became a crucible that refined his character, strengthened his resolve, deepened his wisdom. Resilience isn't about pretending challenges don't hurt. Resilience is about refusing to let temporary pain create permanent limitations. It's about understanding that every setback contains the seeds of a comeback if you have the wisdom to nurture them properly. It's about recognizing that the same pressure that crushes coal creates diamonds, that the same heat that melts metal also forges weapons. Here's the truth about crisis that will transform how you respond to every challenge for the rest of your life. Crisis doesn't create character. Crisis reveals character. The person you become under pressure is the person you've always been beneath the surface. The values you maintain when it costs you something are your real values. The principles you uphold when no one would blame you for compromising are your true principles. This is why preparation is so crucial. You don't develop resilience in the moment of crisis. You develop resilience through the daily choices you make when life is relatively calm. You build strength through small acts of discipline. You create endurance through consistent commitment to your values. You develop the internal structure that will sustain you through external storms by practicing integrity in ordinary moments. The turning point comes when you realize that excellence and resilience aren't burdens to bear, but weapons to wield. They're not requirements imposed on you from outside, but powers you develop from within. When you choose excellence, you're not just improving your performance. You're building your capacity for greater responsibility. When you embrace resilience, you're not just surviving difficulty. You're developing the strength necessary for lasting success. But here's what separates leaders from followers, creators from consumers, those who shape culture from those who are shaped by it. Leaders understand that excellence and resilience are not personal achievements to hoard, but gifts to share. They use their strength to strengthen others. They apply their wisdom to solve problems bigger than their own immediate needs. They leverage their influence to create opportunities for people beyond their immediate circle. This is the mindset shift that transforms everything. When you stop pursuing excellence for recognition and start pursuing it for impact, you discover a source of motivation that external circumstances cannot touch. When you stop developing resilience just to survive your own challenges and start building it to help others overcome theirs, you tap into a strength that difficulty cannot diminish. The practical application is both simple and challenging. Simple because it starts with the next task in front of you, the next conversation you have, the next decision you make. Challenging because it requires you to choose excellence and resilience consistently, especially when you don't feel like it, especially when others around you are choosing mediocrity and complaint. Start treating every responsibility as preparation for the responsibility you truly want. Approach every challenge as training for the success you're called to achieve. View every setback as setup for the comeback that will define your legacy. This isn't positive thinking. This is strategic living. This is the mindset that transforms ordinary people into extraordinary leaders. Your current situation is not your final destination. Your present circumstances are not your permanent conditions. Your past failures are not your future limitations. But the excellence and resilience you develop right now, right here, in whatever situation you find yourself, these will determine whether your future is a continuation of your past or a transformation into something far greater. Number 6, practical application of spiritual principles. You know the principles, don't you? You've heard the teachings, read the wisdom, nodded in agreement at the profound truths that resonate deep in your soul. But knowing and doing are separated by the greatest chasm in human experience. You've been collecting wisdom like souvenirs, admiring truth like artwork, discussing principles like theories. Meanwhile, your life remains fundamentally unchanged because you've never built the bridge between understanding and application, between inspiration and implementation. This is where most people fail, not in recognizing truth, but in refusing to pay the price of transformation. They want the results of wisdom without the responsibility of wisdom. They desire the benefits of spiritual principles without the behavior that activates those principles. They seek the rewards of character without the choices that create character. They're spiritual window shoppers, admiring the merchandise but never making the purchase. Let me be absolutely clear about something that will determine whether this conversation changes your life or just makes you feel temporarily motivated. Spiritual principles are not philosophical concepts to discuss at dinner parties. They are not religious theories to debate in study groups. They are not motivational slogans to post on social media. Spiritual principles are practical technologies for transforming reality, concrete strategies for creating the life you were designed to live. But here's what makes spiritual principles different from mere self-help techniques. Self-help focuses on changing your circumstances. Spiritual principles focus on changing you. Self-help promises quick fixes. Spiritual principles demand deep transformation. Self-help treats symptoms. Spiritual principles address root causes. Self-help seeks to make you comfortable in your limitations. Spiritual principles call you to transcend them entirely. The entrepreneurial mindset I'm calling you to embrace isn't just about starting a business or launching a venture. It's about approaching every area of your life with the creativity of an owner rather than the passivity of an employee. It's about taking responsibility for results rather than just completing tasks. It's about solving problems rather than just following instructions. It's about creating value rather than just consuming resources. Think about how differently entrepreneurs approach challenges compared to employees. When an employee encounters an obstacle, they report it to someone else and wait for instructions. When an entrepreneur encounters an obstacle, they see an opportunity to create a solution. When an employee faces uncertainty, they seek security. When an entrepreneur faces uncertainty, they see possibility. When an employee experiences failure, they make excuses. When an entrepreneur experiences failure, they extract lessons. This isn't just about business. This is about life. When you apply entrepreneurial thinking to your relationships, you stop waiting for others to make you happy and start creating environments where happiness can flourish. When you apply entrepreneurial thinking to your health, you stop looking for magic solutions and start building systems that create lasting vitality. When you apply entrepreneurial thinking to your finances, you stop hoping for better circumstances and start creating multiple streams of income. But entrepreneurial thinking without spiritual foundation becomes mere ambition, and ambition without wisdom leads to destruction. This is why so many successful people are miserable, why so many wealthy individuals are empty, why so many accomplished leaders are spiritually bankrupt. They develop the skills to achieve without developing the character to handle achievement. They learn to create success without learning to create meaning. The integration of entrepreneurial mindset with spiritual principles creates something far more powerful than either approach alone. It gives you the drive to pursue excellence and the wisdom to define what excellence means. It provides the courage to take risks and the discernment to take the right risks. It supplies the energy to work hard and the understanding of why that work matters. Joseph exemplified this integration perfectly. He approached every situation with the creativity and responsibility of an entrepreneur, but always within the framework of spiritual principles that kept him anchored to purpose greater than personal advancement. He saw opportunities where others saw only problems, but he pursued those opportunities in ways that served others rather than just serving himself. When Joseph was managing Potiphar's household, he didn't just do his assigned duties. He improved systems, increased efficiency, expanded value. He approached slavery with the mindset of an owner, and as a result, he was given authority that transcended his official position. When he was imprisoned, he didn't just serve his time. He organized the prison, helped other inmates, created order from chaos. He turned his cell into a boardroom and his chains into connections. This is what happens when you stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as an architect of solutions. This is the transformation that occurs when you quit making excuses and start making improvements. This is the result when you choose to respond like an entrepreneur rather than react like an employee. But the practical application requires more than just changing your mindset. It requires changing your daily habits, your moment-by-moment choices, your automatic responses to routine situations. It requires what I call living by principles rather than preferences, operating from purpose rather than impulse, choosing based on what serves your long-term vision rather than what feels good in the short-term moment. Here's where most people sabotage their own transformation. They make dramatic declarations about changing their life, but they refuse to change their daily routine. They want extraordinary results while maintaining ordinary habits. They seek transformation while avoiding the inconvenience of actual change. They're willing to think differently but not willing to act differently, and thinking without action is just sophisticated procrastination. The bridge between intention and manifestation is built through small, consistent choices that align with your stated values and declared goals. It's choosing to wake up 30 minutes earlier to invest in learning rather than sleeping in because it's comfortable. It's choosing to have difficult conversations that build authentic relationships rather than avoiding conflict to maintain false peace. It's choosing to invest money in assets that appreciate rather than spending it on liabilities that depreciate. Every choice is either moving you toward the life you want or away from it. Every decision is either building the character necessary for your destiny or reinforcing the patterns that keep you trapped in mediocrity. Every action is either serving your purpose or serving your preferences. There is no neutral ground, no insignificant moments, no choices that don't matter. The practical wisdom I'm sharing isn't theoretical. It's been tested in the laboratory of real life, proven through the experiences of people who transformed their circumstances by transforming themselves. But it only works if you work it. It only produces results if you apply it consistently. It only creates change if you choose change over comfort. Your moment of decision is now. You can close this video and return to the same patterns that have created your current limitations, or you can choose to begin implementing the principles that will create the life you truly want. You can continue making excuses for why change is difficult, or you can start making choices that make change inevitable. The principles are clear. The path is available. The power is within you. The only question remaining is whether you have the courage to stop talking about transformation and start living it, whether you're willing to move from knowing what to do to actually doing what you know. Your future is waiting, but it's not going to create itself. It requires you to become the person capable of manifesting the life you've been dreaming about. That transformation begins now with the next choice you make, the next action you take, the next principle you apply. The question is not whether you can change. The question is whether you will. Right now, as these words reach your consciousness, something is shifting within you. You can feel it, can't you? That ancient knowing stirring in your chest, that recognition of who you were always meant to become. The same divine spark that guided Daniel through Babylon's corridors, that elevated Joseph from Egypt's dungeons, is awakening in you at this very moment. You are standing at the threshold between two worlds. Behind you lies the familiar territory of limitation, where security is an illusion and dreams defer to circumstances. Ahead of you stretches the landscape of possibility, where wisdom creates wealth, where purpose multiplies resources, where every challenge becomes a catalyst for greater influence. But here's what I want you to understand with absolute clarity. This threshold you're standing on isn't a destination. It's a doorway. Every principle you've received today is not an ending but a beginning. Every truth that has resonated in your spirit is not a conclusion but a commencement. You haven't reached the summit of transformation. You've simply awakened to the reality that you were born to climb. The wisdom flowing through these conversations, these revelations, these ancient secrets made practical for modern living. This is just the beginning of what's available to those who choose the path of the wise. When you subscribe to this journey, you're not just following content. You're joining a fellowship of people who refuse to accept mediocrity as their ceiling, who understand that spiritual principles are the most practical tools for creating extraordinary life. You are not the same person who began this conversation. The seeds of your financial transformation, your spiritual alignment, your purpose awakening have already been planted. Now comes the sacred responsibility of cultivation, the daily choice to water those seeds with wisdom, to protect them with integrity, to nurture them with consistent action. The question echoing in eternity isn't whether you can change your circumstances. The question is whether you will become the person your circumstances have been waiting for.